Hello and welcome back to my channel. It is November. Why? Why? First of all, I just want to say a big hello because there are a lot of new people here. I had a couple of shorts that did really well this past month and just ended up getting a whole bunch of new followers. So thank you so much for being here. The beginning of every month, I do a recap of the previous month's books that I read, and I review all of the books that I read that previous month. A lot of books that I review don't necessarily make it to TikTok or Instagram in short form, so here is where I do reviews of everything that I read for the month. So that's really exciting. The other thing I want to say that's pretty cool is this past month I spent a lot of time reading query letters and manuscripts and things like that for Ezeekat Press, which is my subscriber community. It's very similar to Patreon. It's on Bindery, except unlike Patreon, where I'm making extra content, I also get to use some of the funds from subscriptions to publish a book. And so I've been reading query letters and manuscripts, trying to pick a book that I'm going to publish. And I think I found the one. I think that's all I'm allowed to say about that. More information to come on that, but it has been a really exciting month. Reading these different manuscripts that have been coming in from both agented and indie authors, but I think I found one I really love, and we're kind of going through the process of that. So if I say any more, I'll get in trouble. Okay, great. So let's take a look at everything that I read in October, and let's jump in. Okay, so these are not in any particular order. I read Beholder by Ryan Sala. I am a huge fan of Ryan Sala's work at this point. And I loved The Honeys. That was his last book. And Beholder is even creepier, even crawlier, just such a mind-bendy, twisty-turny book. I said in my review, I did review this one on TikTok and Instagram, and I said in that review, I had just finished watching The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix, and I loved that, and then I started reading this, and it was like a really good segue, because there are definitely some similarities. There are even some moments where I was like, oh, that reminds me so much of this, right? And obviously they're not in any way based on each other. They came out literally the same week. But there are definitely moments. So if you're looking, this is YA. If you're looking for something kind of to transition off that show, like you just finished watching that, you're like, I need something similar. This would be really good. This follows a young man, and he wakes up basically at a party, and like everyone at the party is dead. And I was kind of trying to figure out what is going on. And also he has like mirror magic. So he's able to like stare into a mirror and like basically rewind time in the mirror to see like what the mirror saw. It's really cool, but you encounter other kinds of magic. It's kind of got this surreal vibe to it, and it's got some really creepy just scenes that just mess with your mind. And I don't know, it was really good. It was probably, of like all the spooky season reads that I read, or like scarier or spookier books, this was my favorite. It was just really good. I will say it took me a little time to get into it. I think the first couple of chapters I was very like, I felt a little whiplash. I was like, what's going on? And I felt that way with The Honeys too. So with The Honeys, I remember the first chapter I was like, whoa, and then it took me like 3 or 4 chapters to be like, to like settle in and be like, ooh, okay, I like this. I like where this is going. And that was the same with Beholder. The first chapter I was like, whoa. And then once I like got into the story, I was like, this is phenomenal. But yeah, this was probably, I was about to say it was my favorite thing that I read this month, but I don't know if that's true. It was one of my favorite things I read this month. It was really, really good. So if you're looking for something, I know technically the Halloween season is over. Sadly, now we have to start decking the halls and jingling the bells and all of that nonsense. But if you, like me, want to hang on to the spirit of dread a little longer, I would check out Beholder, because it was really, really, really good. And yeah, highly recommend. All right, next up, I actually just finished this one yesterday. I haven't talked about it on anything yet. This is Witch of Wild Things. I picked this up. I actually was considering making this the book club pick for Ezeekat's book club for October, but then I went with something else instead, which we'll talk about. And this is like kind of cozy, witchy. It deals with this girl. She has she has sisters. I can't remember. 2 sisters? Oh God, why can't I remember? Do you ever have that thing where like you finish a book, the second you finish it, you like the plot like puddles out of your head, you can't remember any of it? That is me. So she has sisters. One of them passed away when she was younger, and she is being haunted by the ghost of that sister. And she is herself a like plant witch, so she can like do things to like manipulate plants. I actually read 2 books about plant witches this month. That's kind of fun. And she can also like identify plants just by looking at them. It's really cool. She like talk to plants. And so it kind of has this like Halloween Hallmark movie vibe where she like goes back home to like try and sort things out. And she's like, I'm only going to stay for a hot minute while I get my life together. And then like the old, what is it called? The place where they like grow plants and flowers, like, come work for us. And she's like, oh, I guess I need some money. I'll go work for you. And then there's a hot man and she's like, oh, but I have history with this hot man. You see where this is going. It's very Hallmark movie, but I don't know. It did deal with some like heavier topics, and I thought I really liked the writing. It was cozy, but with like a little bit of weight to it. Like it definitely dealt with some like harder hitting topics of like her past and, you know, why she has kind of avoided getting into a relationship, and also like the death of her sister. And there's some like heavier topics here. Even to the point where I might consider checking out trigger warnings on this book if you're going to check it out, because there are some like sort of heavier things that are dealt with at certain points in the book. But overall, it is a fairly cozy book. Like I said, it's kind of got that like Hallmark movie vibe. I don't know if I would have loved this most of the time, but I feel like I read it right at the perfect time. I started reading this like the day after the day that Matthew Perry passed away, or that we learned about that, or even the day after. And I don't know, I think a book about dealing with grief and all of the things that involves, I kind of needed that. I talked about on my Instagram how, you know, I don't really normally care that much when celebrities pass away, but Friends has been a really important part of my life, and kind of Friends is a show I watch when I need to heal a little bit. So that was really hard. And so I feel like I read this book at the exact right moment that I needed to read this book. And because of that, I thought it was really quite good. Is it the best like cozy, witchy, spooky book I've ever read? No, but I really liked it. And it was a very good palate cleanser. And it was a very like easy read. And I don't know, it kind of filled my heart with joy a little bit. It's not a perfect book. There are definitely things in the plot where I was like, eh. There's especially something big towards the end that I was like, do I love that? I don't know that I love it. But it kind of was one of those books that it kind of felt like a nice little cozy, like wearing a cozy sweater on a chill day. Like that was the kind of book this was. And the sweater has some holes and some frays, but you don't even care because it's warm and you're cold. That's how this book made me feel. That's the best way I could describe it. So that was Witch of Wild Things. I really liked this quite a bit. And, you know, check it out if any of that sounds good. You might too. I wanted to read something this month that was genuinely scary. I didn't realize Beholder was going to be as scary as it was. So I had added Dead Silence to my TBR. I've owned this book for I think over a year now. I bought it pretty close when it came out, and then I've just owned it forever. And I'm trying slowly to get through things that I own that I haven't read. And a lot of people have spoken really highly about this book. It kind of has alien vibes. You know, this woman and her crew are on a spaceship and they get a signal. You know what it reminded me of is Dead Space. If you've ever played the video game Dead Space, this really had vibes of that. So they get a distress signal and they go, and it ends up being this like huge, like think Titanic, but in space, okay? It's like a very expensive passenger liner, and apparently it went missing a while back, and everyone on board is dead, and they're gonna go onto the ship and try and figure out what happened. And as it turns out, they decide that they want to try and take the ship back with them, because, I don't know, they want to sell things on the ship. Like, there's some laws involved that because they found it as, like, scavengers, they are allowed to sell the things on it and make money, and then the girl can start her own scavenging company. It's a whole thing. But, of course, everybody died on the ship, so they get on the ship, and they're like, what's going on? Why is everybody dead? It looks like something bad happened here. What happened here? And so you kind of go through the mystery of finding out what happened, right? At first, I really liked this book. I thought it was spooky. I liked the Dead Space vibes. I love the Dead Space series, so I thought I really liked where it was going. But I think once you finally got into like finding out what it was, I was like, meh. And I also think I didn't love I think my expectations were in the wrong place. I think I went into this book wanting like a monster story, or like, you know, like a aliens, or like space aliens, or like space zombies or something like that. And I didn't get any of that. I think, so part of me not loving this came from my own expectations of the book that then didn't get fulfilled. The book also, from the start, takes place in a present day where she's like relaying the story of what happened. And then, you know, you'll go back in time and see like everything that leads up to this moment. And then eventually the timelines meet up and you kind of follow her in present day. The problem with this is I felt like the present day sort of spoiled any sort of surprises in the past. I don't know. I get that there are stories that are like, oh yeah, and you know, well, you're here now. What happened to your crew? And she's like, they're all dead. And then you flash back to like how they all died. I think that can work, But in this scenario, it just made me like, okay, well, I know what's going to happen, so hurry up. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. I thought it was okay. I wanted to like this a lot more than I did. And I think I just had so many expectations for this book that were not met. I liked the first third of the book a lot. Like a lot. And the other 2/3 of the book I thought were just really just okay. So S.A. Barnes is coming out with another book. I think this maybe next year. It is also supposed to be like scary in space. And I will absolutely read it because I did like the writing and I'm very willing to give S.A. Barnes another chance. But this book for me was just okay. Just okay. Ah, yes, of course, I read The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. Prepare for me to gush about this book. If you're new here or if you're old here and don't know this, V.E. Schwab is one of, if not my favorite author, it's they're definitely up there. V.E. Schwab is one of my all-time favorite authors. I just adore everything that they write. And this was no different. This is the start of a new trilogy that comes after the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. It follows a lot of the same characters, but several years have passed, and like we're kind of starting a new adventure, a new story. One thing I will say, this book has been marketed as a great place for old, fans to come back to the world or for new fans to jump in. I don't think that's the case. I think it's great for old fans. I think if you've read the original trilogy and you're ready to jump back in, absolutely do it. But I don't think this is a good place for new fans to jump in because I think you would be very lost and very confused. And even if you weren't lost and confused, I do not think you would enjoy this book nearly as much if you had that like previous 3 books in your memory bank. Even if you read those 3 books and it's been a while, I would at least read like a recap. If you don't have time to reread all 3, at least read like a recap so you can get your, oh, right, that's what happened, right? But all of that to say, I loved this. Now, this is, as far as high fantasy goes, this is like a slow, very methodical, like character-driven, character exploration story. There's very little action that happens in this book. A lot of it is us like coming back to these characters, seeing what's happened to them, seeing where they've been, and kind of dealing with the fallout of the previous trilogy. And this book is interesting in that way because in some ways it acts as an epilogue to the previous trilogy, and in other ways it acts as the start of a new trilogy. So, and then, of course, it has its own thing going on. Like, it does have really a complete story within it as well. So it's an interesting book in that case, and it does introduce some really amazing new characters. In particular, there are 2 new queens actually introduced, and both of them are amazing. One of them is like a mother with a very scientific mind that will literally do anything if it means like scientific discovery. Loved her. And then another queen who kind of gets placed on the throne almost like by chance, and she's trying to figure out the best way to like run her kingdom. There's just so many cool elements of this book. It's funny because this book is over 600 pages long and it is not long enough. Like I got to the end and I was like, no, I need more. This world just wraps you up in it. I mean, to me, reading this book feels like sitting on a bench in this world and just people watching because the characters are so real and so vivid and there's so much depth to every single character in the book. They feel like real people, and I just want to continue watching them go about their lives and see what happens to them next. But yeah, very good. If you like V. Schwab, if you liked Darker Shades of Magic, if you're ready to continue that world, chances are you've probably already purchased this book. Also, can we talk about this? My cat took a big old bite out of this book. How rude is that? I really loved this a lot. And when I remember earlier, I looked down at my pile and I said, oh, I think this was the other thing that I would say is one of my favorite things I read this month. This and Beholder were excellent. I probably would say this was my favorite thing I read this month, but Beholder was like a very close second. They were both really, really good. But I just wouldn't jump into this if you're new to the series. I would start with Darker Shade of Magic. And the good news is, you know how sometimes there's like a series of books and people are like, well, you should probably start with these, but I think we talk about this a lot with Grishaverse, right? Like people are always like, well, you should read the first 3 Grishaverse books, even though people don't really love them. The good news is the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy is phenomenal. It is some of V.E. Schwab's absolute best work. So if you haven't read them, you owe it to yourself to read them before this book because they are absolute treats. They're so good and they will make you love this book even more. So yeah, I loved it. Fragile Threads of Power. Excellent. Now, for Ezeekat's book club this month, we read The Ghosts of Rose Hill. Now, this is a book that is told in verse. And what's funny about this is I had gotten this book because I knew we were going to do it for book club. And then I downloaded the audiobook and didn't realize it was in verse until I just one day happened to open this. And I was already like halfway through the book. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Because I was so confused of like, how is this book this big? And yet the audiobook was like 4 hours long. I was very confused. I didn't understand. I was like, it must have very big type. But no, it's a book in verse. This deals with a young woman who she goes to Prague. She goes to stay with her aunt in Prague, and she ends up like meeting the ghosts of Prague. And sort of, it's just this very poetic, kind of beautiful tale of her meeting the ghost children and kind of learning their plight and sort of falling for one of them. But like, you know, the idea of life and death and what it means to lose yourself and, you know, first love. And it's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful book. It was over too fast. I mean, partially because it's in verse, so it's less words, but it's so poetic. There's so many lines of like, this is a book I think in the coming months I might reread just so I can do some annotating of it, because there's some quotes that I was just like, whoo, like the writing is superb. Now, I've never read anything by R.M. Romero before, but now that I've read this, I know that they have several other books, and I'm very excited to try out some of those other books because this was astounding. If you guys follow Meg's Tea Room on TikTok or Instagram, I don't know if she does YouTube. Does she do YouTube? Meg's Tea Room. I honestly can't remember. I think she does YouTube. I can't remember. Anyway, she recommended this to me, and it was an excellent recommendation because this was so good. It was so beautiful. It was so lyrical. And it just was, I don't know, it's like the kind of book that feels like a fairy tale. It kind of feels like you're being swept off your feet a little bit. And just, oh my God, there's also just like so much culture and history to the book. I really adored this in a way that I was not expecting. I don't know, this book also very much warmed my heart. It's just beautiful. And I would recommend it. And it's a very quick read. You can read this, you can sit down and read this in an afternoon. If you need something to like read on a chill day with like a cup of cider or tea, and you just need something to like mellow out, I mean, it's a stunning work. It's really good. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it because it's so good. So, The Ghosts of Rose Hill. All right, next up, I will be doing a review of this on TikTok and Instagram. I just haven't yet. This is The Spells We Cast by Jason June. So I love Jason June. I find his writing so fun and so funny. And this has like a grumpy sunshine relationship, like enemies to lovers, and it deals with these kids that are like teenagers that are basically doing this competition to see if they can be part of this like magical community that helps like fight. What are they fighting? I can't remember. The secret society known as the Guild, which we strive their powers to preserve magical balance. But I can't remember what they're fighting. They're fighting something. This was one of the first things that I read during the month, so my brain has obviously like But even anyway, these two start, they're part of this competition to try and join this guild. And they find out pretty early on that when they do magic near each other, their magic is enhanced. And the guild is like, what's going on? Because their magic is like crazy powerful when they're together. And so it follows that. And, then you kind of find out some like deeper secrets about the guild. It's got a really cool magic system to it because there's different types of magic within the book. I really loved the two main characters. I think Jason June writes banter so well. Like the two main characters and their friends, like when they're together and they're all talking, I love all of that. I think my complaint about this book is I didn't know it was going to be a series. So I got to the end and it was a very clear cliffhanger. And I was like, excuse me? Where's what? I wish I had been more knowledgeable about that going in. And that's nobody's fault but my own. Let me make that very clear. Like Jason Jude had said on his page, like this is a series. I think it's a trilogy. But I didn't know that. I just went in because all of his other books have been standalone. So in my head, I was like, oh, another fun standalone Jason June book. That being said, though, because this is going to be a YA trilogy, there is a lot of setup in this book. So I feel like most of this book is kind of in the favor of setting up the story and setting up their relationship. So I do think the next book or books will probably be even better because this is doing so much setup. But like I said, I love the two main characters. I love the magic system. There's some very cool like action sequences. There's some very cool the use of magic, and all of that to say there are also some really good twists. Like when you find out like kind of what's going on and what's been happening, you'll be like, what? Because there's like some nefarious twists and turns throughout the story. So this is really good. And I read this for spooky season, but you could really read this anytime because it didn't feel particularly like Halloween-y vibes. Like this is a really magical book that you could read anytime. It kind of reminded me of Carry On, but like by Rainbow Rowell, but like a less problematic Carry On. if that makes sense. I know there's a lot to be said about Carry On and Rainbow Rowell and all of that, right? But we're not going to get into that here. But if you're looking for something like that, that doesn't come with all of that, The Spells We Cast, really, really good. And I liked it a lot. I think this is the first thing I read this month, which is funny that it's at the bottom of my pile. I guess, I don't know. This is Wildseed Witch. This is the first of a duology, I believe. I think. I don't think it's a trilogy. I don't know. I've only read the first book. I ordered the second book, but I haven't read it yet. This was so good. Are you kidding me? This deals with a young girl who basically finds out that she has magical plant, flower related powers. And she ends up being taken to a school where, you know, they can explore, like a summer school situation where she can explore this. And she, of course, goes to school and like everybody else in the school already knows about magic. They know magic is real. She comes from the outside. So everything is new to her. And that's like very challenging, right? So everybody's kind of like, wow, this girl doesn't know anything. And she's trying to kind of like catch up with everybody. I loved the main character of this book. I loved the story of this book. I loved the magic of this book. My only complaint, it's such a silly complaint though. She goes to the school and I think they make mention that she like misses like the first part of orientation or something. But I swear she just doesn't know anything to the point where I'm like mad at the teachers for not explaining things to her. Like there are situations where she's getting like, there's a thing in her room that like changes color if she's like in trouble or in danger of being expelled. And she doesn't even know that that's what it is. So when it changes color, she's like, one of her classmates has to be like, hey, that means you're in trouble. And she's like, what? There are so many moments where like she is so far behind the class and there are no teachers like helping her catch up that I found that very frustrating. It's sort of like being taken to it's like if you went to high school and they put you in like a trigonometry class, but you didn't even know like basic addition. And they just like looked at you funny when you're like, really? You can't figure out this trigonometry? And nobody like ever bothers to say like, do you know how to add numbers? Like that is what it felt like. It was really frustrating. Now, eventually things kind of smooth over and we move past that element of the book. At which point I really, really loved it. I thought, I mean, this was adorable. It was cute. It was cozy. It is middle grade, but I often talk about middle grade. There are middle grade books that I feel like are really like made for middle grade and are best read by middle graders. And then there are middle grade books that I think anybody could read and enjoy. This definitely felt like something anybody could read and enjoy. This was just really lovely and it was really cute. And I thought, you know, it really has that beautiful idea of like being yourself. Oh, and she's a vlogger, so that's like her whole thing. She's like trying to be a YouTube vlogger, so it deals with her wanting to like figure out fun makeup looks and how she's gonna get more views. And I don't know, I thought it was so cute. It kind of takes like magical witchy school vibes and combines it with like the 2023 aspect of like trying to like be an influencer. It was like a really fun combination. I thought it was so cute. And I don't know, I had a smile on my face the whole time I was reading it, with the exception of the thing with the teachers, because that drove me bananagrams, that like nobody bothered to say like, hey, seems like you're having trouble knowing anything. Maybe we should do a quick review. Because it was like bonkers. I mean, I guess you could say that maybe because the whole thing, like she's called a Wildseed because she's magical, but she's not from within the magical community, right? So like they kind of look at her as like almost dangerous because she doesn't really know what her power is or how to use it. She's coming from the outside. And that's a big part of the book, right? Of like an outsider trying to fit in, but also like be their best self and be their brightest self. And, you know, all those fun middle grade story tropes. But at the same time, I'm like, somebody needs to tell this girl that she's not allowed to do that thing that she keeps doing. Because if you don't ever tell her that, she's never gonna know. From an educational perspective of like what makes a good educator, this book stressed me out so much. I'm like, please, just send her to, like, have a teacher pull her aside and be like, young lady, these are the things you are doing that are causing your magic to destroy the school. Because she doesn't know, and that is so frustrating. And I guess to a degree that happens to kids, right? Where like if a kid falls behind and no teacher is willing to take the minute to be like, hey, I noticed you're struggling with this. Let me help you. What questions do you have? That would be very frustrating. So maybe it's supposed to replicate that. Maybe I'm coming to this realization now. Maybe it's supposed to replicate that feeling of just being lost and feeling like nobody is giving you a chance to catch up. But as an adult, I was annoyed at the other adults in the story. And I think that was how I was supposed to feel. I was supposed to be annoyed with them because they were annoying. Anyway, like I said, I think this is a duology, and I intend to read the next book. It is called Wildseed Witch Charm Life, which sounds so cute. So I will read that at some point, but I really liked this too. I don't think there wasn't a single dud this month. Well, I didn't love Dead Silence, but other than that, I liked all the books I read this month quite a bit. So yeah, that is everything I read in October. I have I've scheduled myself to read a lot of books in November. I don't know if that's going to happen because I'm also doing NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. So I'm going to be trying to write a book, 50,000 words of a book in the month of November. I've already started working on that today, so I've already met my word count for one day. Yay! And then, of course, with Bindery and Ezeekat Press, which I'll put a link to below, we are hopefully going to be announcing the book that I'm going to be working on for that, like publishing for that. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Keep your fingers crossed for that all works out. So that'll be exciting. November's going to be a crazy month. There's so much happening. Oh, and also, Thanksgiving is happening this month. Can I just fast forward to December? Because I'm stressed just listing all of this. It's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to have a great November. You're going to read lots of great books. I'm going to read lots of great books. It's going to be so good. I would love to know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I would love to know if you have any plans to read something fun in November and what you're excited about, or if you read anything great in October. Let me know all of those things. I hate to do this, but it is YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you so much to the new subscribers that are here this month. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful month. And of course, as always, happy reading.